Welcome everybody, and so we are starting our Buddhism 101 class. I'm trying to make sure I have everything set up nicely, everything off, because I've been very bad about turning everything off like I'm supposed to. And so today we will have our live stream Facebook live stream class of Buddhism 101, and we will be talking about different things today. We're going to talk about meditation, and then we're also going to practice some meditation. We'll also be talking about a topic called ego, based on Buddhist psychology, as well as some of my experience as a psychologist. I think that topic has some relevant things to tell us, especially as things get heated up politically. I think this topic will also help us a lot in the area of our own practice with our families, as many of us are now spending maybe a lot more time with our families than we are used to. And so this topic of Buddhist ego should be one that is you should find very applicable and very useful. During today's meeting, then, we will do a similar process, a similar agenda that we had these last few times that we've done this. We will start off first with some meditation. I'll give you instructions on the meditation. After doing about 10 minutes of meditation, we'll have a Dharma talk. And then we'll have a second meditation after the Dharma talk. The goal is that for the first meditation, the idea is that you will calm your mind, be more present, let go of some of the stresses at home in your life, to give yourself permission for a few minutes to just be, to relax, to center yourself. One of the things I like to say often is that anxiety tends to have us focusing on the future, and depression has us focus on the past. And so the solution there is to be more and more present oriented. And the more we do that, the less we will suffer from anxiety and depression. And so give yourself permission for these 10 minutes to just be present, to be mindful, and to just relax. And that's going to be the goal of the first meditation. The second meditation will come after the Dharma talk. And what I'm hoping you will do is engage in another form of meditation, an insight meditation. And what I want you to do during that time is to simply, whatever jumped out at you during my Dharma talk, whatever caught your attention the most, whatever struck you as being most relevant to your life, sit with that during the duration of the meditation and see if you gain any additional insights. Reflect on how those teachings may apply to your life. For meditation, let's talk about the instructions. For the meditation, what you want to do is primarily focus on your breath. The advantage there is that you take your breath with you everywhere you go, and so you can practice this everywhere you go. A lot of people confuse meditation. Well, one use of meditation is to relax and to calm yourself. But meditation, especially mindfulness meditation, is something that goes beyond just relaxing and being peaceful. It's about self-awareness, about observing yourself and the world, being able to see it as it really is, as opposed to what you think it should be. And so we focus on the breath because that's something we carry with us at all times. It's something that we do naturally. It's not for the most part, it does not take much effort to breathe. And when we are unable to breathe well, we become acutely aware of our breathing. Given the recent outbreak, one of the ways that my meditation has changed is as I focus on my breath during meditation, I am very grateful for that breath. And I recognize that there may come a time when taking a breath will be difficult. And so I'm grateful now, and I appreciate it now, and it helps me be more now, more present oriented. And that gratitude helps me be more at peace and happier. So you focus on the breath, and there are 3 techniques that we often talk about for this focus. One is to simply focus on the sensation of breathing, how it feels as the breath enters your body, and how it feels as your breath exits your body. Whether it be how it feels entering your nose, hitting the back of your throat, how your lungs expand, your diaphragm expands, or the heat of your breath as you exhale. Simply focus on the sensation of breathing, on the mechanics of breathing, the process of breathing. Just focus everything you have on your breath. The other way of doing it is to count your breaths. And so sometimes counting our breaths help us stay focused. If you're used to always being if your mind is used to always doing something, then this at least gives your mind something to do, counting, while being focused on the breath. And so you'll count up to 10, and when you reach 10, you start over again. And if you lose your count at any time, you simply start over again at 1. The third method that we often teach at the temple is to use a gata or a mantra. And so this is a phrase or a word that is meaningful to you. And so the one we usually recommend is, as you're inhaling, you say, breathing in, I calm my mind. Breathing out, I smile. And as you breathe out, try to have a half smile on your face. A Mona Lisa smile is what I like to call it. And simply repeat that over and over. It's very common to have distractions. It's very common to get bored during meditation. And so it's important to push through those distractions, to not be conquered by the boredom, to be compassionate and non-judgmental with the distractions, but also don't engage them. So what I mean by that is, if you are, let's say you had a bad event today, something happened today that is really on your mind, then and as you're meditating, it comes up, you just say, oh, it's a thought I'm thinking about today, and then period. You stop right there. You don't let it, you don't engage it, you don't think any more about it. If any emotions arise, oh, there's an emotion, and so you label it, and you simply let it go. The image I often use is that of a wave crashing upon the shore. So let the wave crash on the shore, and the water recede back into the water, into the ocean. Don't engage the thoughts. Just acknowledge that they're there, be compassionate with yourself, and simply move on. And refocus then on the breath. In terms of sitting, you want to be able to sit in a position that's comfortable but not too comfortable. So not so uncomfortable that you're distracted, but not so comfortable that you fall asleep. And so try to find that happy medium. Typically, the individuals meditating individuals at the temple will sit with their legs crossed and their hands on their lap. Some of us are sitting at our desk, and so we probably have modified that a little, just as I have. And that's all right. What we'll do now is let's take a moment to settle in, get in a comfortable position. Start paying attention to your breath. In a minute here, or less, in a few seconds here, I will ring the bell, and we will simply meditate for 10 minutes. Good. So those of you who have not met me before or haven't had a chance to go to the temple, um, one of the things about my style is that I take my experiences and I apply them to Buddhism and try to bring the Buddhist messages from 2,500 years ago into the context of our time now. And very important to my experience, my personal experience, is that I am a psychologist, and one of the side interests of mine is an area called evolutionary psychology, which tries to apply evolutionary theory to psychology, and I bring that to my Buddhist practice. As you practice more and more, excuse me, as you develop your understanding of Buddhism, you'll find that you'll do the same, that you will see Buddhism through your perspective and through your experiences. That's one of the beautiful things about the Buddhist teachings, is that it can apply to so many things. So one of the important concepts in both Buddhism and in evolutionary psychology is this idea of ego. Buddhism uses the word ego. In psychology, ego means something different, or means multiple things. It's been used in different ways by different theorists. But from the evolutionary psychologist perspective, ego could be most easily translated into status. As animals, as creatures, we are very mindful of our status. And Buddha warned against the ego. And I find that it's one of those aspects of the spiritual journey that is often overlooked because it's so subtle, so insidious, so easy to miss. It's such a part of who we are. It's even genetically ingrained in us that we, unless it's pointed out to us, we may not see it. And it's a cause of a lot of our problems. And I wrote an article about this several years back, and I just happened to find it today. And I said, well, I'm going to read parts of this here to you. So from the perspective of evolutionary psychology, your status can make the difference between becoming king or dying. You get angry when someone cuts you off while driving. That's ego. Your older sibling gets another award and you have to endure watching him or her get praised over and over again by your family. That's ego. Your spouse gives you this look because you forgot that thing they've been telling you about all this time, and you feel hurt. That's ego. Your boss or coworker fails to share the credit for a job well done, even though you put in so many hours. And that hurt feeling is ego. You can't stand it when the smart kid in class keeps raising their hand and getting all the answers. How you'd love to slap that smug smile off their face. That's ego. Or if you fear giving a Dharma talk because you don't want to look stupid in front of the community or the Sangha, that's ego. And that applies to any public speaking. That's ego. A large part of ego from the Buddhist understanding is made up of what evolutionary psychologists call status, or what feminists or multicultural theorists would call power. So power differentials, if you've heard that term, very much related to ego and to status. So what we're finding here is that there seems to be an underlying truth that people from multiple perspectives have found it and have given it their own name. From the Christian perspective, the closest term is pride. And so pride is associated with many of these teachings of status. The thing is, like I mentioned, it's encoded in our genetics. We, from a very young age, even before we are forming memories, even before we are sometimes even able to speak, we are aware of our own status in a group. It's innate, much like hunger, thirst, or our sexual drive. It's part of who we are. And from an evolutionary perspective, ego was critical to the survival of our ancestors and our ancestors' chances of having offsprings that survived. We needed this awareness to be mindful of how we stood in our tribe. If we were too low in status, we would get the scraps or leftovers. We'd have poor options when choosing mates. Or if we insulted too many in the tribe, we would be kicked out, severely reducing the chances of our survival. In short, if we were unmindful of our status, and if our ancestors were unmindful of their status, we suffered. If we have high status, say if we're a chief, a first wife, or a shaman, we get first dibs on the food. We'd be able to choose the best fruit. We would have our choice of mates and possibly more than one mate in some cultures, and we would suffer less. And although in our first world culture we don't have to struggle as much as our ancestors did to survive, this acute awareness of status is what drives us to seek out those fly rims on our treads or our tires. It's what causes us to seek out the largest house in the neighborhood. It's what causes us, in part, to seek out titles like MD, JD, or PhD. It's what drives us to look for the Gucci purse or grills for our teeth, the gold chains, the Nike Air Jordans, that BMW, or even that polo shirt. All of that is ego. It's why women dress up not just for men, but so that other women will judge them well. It's why teenage boys wrestle and why teenagers verbally spar. In many cases, it's a struggle for status. This is, at least in part, why countries go to war, why terrorist groups fight amongst themselves, why people strive to be rich or famous, why certain ethnic groups feel threatened by other ethnic groups, whether it be here in the US or any other place around the world. Or even why parents sometimes get so nervous about how others see their children, because their children reflect on them, and so it influences their status. It's all about status and how we are viewed by others. We don't want to be seen for less than we are, and we want to be seen for more than we are. It's why almost every human in the world thinks they are special or meant for something greater. Even the Buddha had to deal with monks who wanted to be seen as the best meditator, the wisest, or even the most eloquent speaker. It's in part why some brag about their lineage or seek to quickly become the head of their own personal sangha or community. Yet, if you reread the long list of all the examples I gave above, many of those things in and of themselves aren't bad. A polo shirt and a Gucci purse are often of high quality and can sometimes be works of beauty. Being rich or famous doesn't in and of itself make you evil. And wanting to be the head of a spiritual community can be quite a noble endeavor. In fact, many of the above examples are rarely done for the sole purpose of just gaining status. So ego plays a part, but often not the sole part, the only reason we do those things. Because, like in so many things we humans do, we often have multiple reasons for doing something. It's when we do these things to bolster an underlying insecurity that it can become dangerous and can lead to greater suffering. For the desire to gain power and status is still a craving and a form of attachment, something that the Buddha has warned us against. It's the belief that if I'm the ruler of the world, I will no longer suffer. If I'm rich enough or smart enough, I won't suffer. If I'm famous enough, wise enough, people will love me and seek me out. Those are the underlying delusions of ego. So what do? How do we address this? It often comes down to the same answer I give for many things. It starts with being mindful. While mindfulness alone is not sufficient, it is the first step. Now that you are aware of these underlying drives that we are born with, then the first step is to recognize them when they come up in ourselves, when they arise. When we turn on the evening news, do you feel certain feelings towards political figures? A lot of times there's ego there, or a sense of powerlessness, or a sense of us versus them, and a status. I'm better, I'm smarter, I'm in power. All that is related to ego. When you start then working on this ego, you want to pay attention, just pay attention to yourself. And actually, I hesitated because I think the easiest place to start would be to spend a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes, maybe even the meditation after this, thinking about a time when you felt personally affronted, disrespected, or hurt. Look for examples where you felt the need to bring down a notch the person who caused you harm by insulting them, by thinking less of them, by talking poorly of them. That's all an attempt to try and regain status. That's an ego exercise. Reflect on some of those ego moments. Look for those moments when you realize ego may not have been the only thing that drove this behavior, but it was a big part of it. And by reflecting on the past, on your past ego behaviors, you may start catching on clues or patterns that will then help you be more mindful of when it happens to you in the future. At first, you'll just catch yourself after the fact. Like you will be caught up by your ego and you won't realize it until afterwards. But reflecting on that, reflecting on what caused the ego to flare up and how you reacted to that ego moment, you'll start noticing again the patterns, noticing the behaviors. And it'll make it easier for you to catch yourself at the moment of engaging in this ego activities. I am horrified and find it very funny that as I practice mindfulness more and more, I catch myself in the moment of being either egotistic or being attached or in anything I'm working on. In the moment, I am aware I am doing it and I cannot stop myself. It's happening before me and I'm like, oh gosh, here we go again. I can't stop it. But I take solace in knowing that, you know what, at least this time I caught it as it was happening. So I'm making an improvement. And so you go from reflecting on past behaviors, reflecting at the moment of engaging the behavior, and then eventually what will happen if you continue this practice is that you will start catching all the precursors, all the things that lead up to those ego events, and you'll be able to catch it and stop the ego event before it even gets started. And that's the goal, to try to get to the point where you can catch yourself about to fall into this trap and avoid it. And there's another step, even earlier than that, one that is should be all our goals, is to get to the point where even the precursors of our ego events don't even arise, where we have achieved a sense of peace and centeredness and present orientedness, that those ego events rarely happen. I haven't reached that yet. I long to be there one day, and I'm working at it. I hope that you will also take what you've learned here today, apply it, think about it, chew on it. I remind you again that the Buddha said, don't believe any of my words just because I said them. And I'll say the same thing to you. Don't believe anything I have taught you here today just because I said them. Apply them to your experience. Experiment. Be mindful. Reflect. And find for yourself if these teachings are pertinent, if these teachings can help you, if these teachings can help others. And apply them to your life. Take out the evolutionary psychologist perspective and start applying your own bias, your own perspective, your own experiences, and apply the teachings that way so that it becomes your own. See if there's anything else here. So I think the last thing I did not mention here was to do this compassionately. The temptation is to judge ourselves as failing, or to judge ourselves for not getting it right away, or getting frustrated with ourselves because we engage in these ego behaviors so often. It doesn't help to be hard on yourself. Be understanding, be compassionate, be nurturing to yourself. Because when you can do this for yourself, it'll be easier for you to do it to others, to help them, to nurture them when their egos are flaring. And when you apply compassion and non-judgment, it becomes an easier path, one that wounds much less. Ultimately, this is not something we can do away with completely. As I said, it's part of who we are, our makeup, how we were created. It's part of our genetics. And the goal then is to manage the ego, to manage the impulses, so that we suffer significantly less and hopefully help others suffer significantly less. Let's take 10 minutes now. We'll do another meditation. As I mentioned before, we'll make this sort of our insight meditation type of thing. Reflect upon what you just heard. Reflect upon the thoughts that you had. If there's anything that really grabbed your attention, anything that jarred another thought that has stuck with you, sit with it, reflect on it, and let it sink in. Be curious about it. Ask questions about it. May any merit accrued by our actions here today bring us and others health, happiness, safety, and peace. For those of you who arrived late, thank you for coming. The live stream will be on our page, and so you can always go back and listen to the beginning of, or listen to any of the live streams. Also, the live streams are left up, and so feel free to make any comments or ask questions. They don't have to be right now. They can be next week, next year, whenever. We'll be watching those. We'll be glad to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to have these 50 minutes of peace, 50 minutes of being present-oriented and sharing that with you. I look forward to being with you again next week. Take care. Goodbye.